Hello, all in the VC and YouTube land. It's Matt, and I'm back with another Rolling Stones album review. And we're up to Undercover, which came out November 7th of 1983. This was successful, relatively speaking. It got plenty of airplay, MTV play at the time. People were talking about it, but by Rolling Stones standards, all their studio albums from Sticky Fingers at least, maybe Let It Bleed, I can't remember off the top of my head now, but all of them had hit number one on the American charts. This time around, though, they only got to number 4 over here. They actually did a little bit better in England. They got to number 3 with this album. So, successful, but with a caveat, I guess. And anyway, so this album came out, and I'm kind of two minds on this record because I bought it back in '83 when it came out. I had played it a lot back then. I haven't listened to it in years, decades, really. So the last 2 or 3 weeks I've been listening to it quite a bit to refamiliarize myself because I had the review to do, and so I wanted to give it some fresh listens and get to know it again. I have this isn't a great album. It's not one of their best. I'll just say that up front, but it does have some good stuff on it, and so I've been enjoying some of that, and it's been fun to revisit and get to know this album, just because whereas you can turn on any classic rock radio station and you can hear Start Me Up and Beast of Burden and Miss You and a lot of those songs just for days on end. But this album, while it had 3 singles released off of it, so it did get airplay, MTV play back at the time, but since then it's just kind of been forgotten. You might, not very often, but once in a blue moon, Undercover of the Night, the title track, still shows up on the radio, but it's been, I can't remember the last time I've heard any of these other songs on the radio. We'd have to go back to the 80s, I think. So it's just kind of fresh and fun to revisit these songs that I hadn't heard in really years. Whereas when I did the reviews on Some Girls and Tattoo You, for instance, a lot of those songs still get played to this day. Great albums, both better albums than this, but it was a little fun. But let's go back to 1983, and boy, would I really wish that we could, because what a great year that was. 80, 82, 83, 84, just wonderful time, much better than now. But this came out, and the strange thing was that I had heretofore been full of glee and overjoyed and happy and hopping around every time a new Rolling Stones album came out. You know, Some Girls and Emotional Rescue and Tattoo You and all that, and just couldn't wait to hear them and go out and buy them and hear them and all that. When the news came out that they were coming out with a new album in '83, for some reason I was going to go out and buy it, definitely. I wanted to hear it, but I just kind of, okay, new Rolling Stones album, I'll give it a listen, go buy it when it comes out. I just wasn't as enthused as I had been previously, and I don't know why that is. And that's not just the Rolling Stones. About that time I sort of began to feel the same about a lot of the old 60s bands. When the new Neil Young album was coming out, or the new McCartney's Pipes of Peace came out in '83, and I didn't rush out and buy it right away. I eventually did, unfortunately, because that's arguably his worst album. But this one's better than Pipes of Peace. I'll go ahead and give you a spoiler alert on that. The Who were sort of gone, supposedly, but new Townsend albums, new whatever. I was more interested at that point, not that I didn't still love the old music by Beatles, Stones, and so forth. The Kinks had an album that was great that year, but it's kind of, the new music was coming up, and this is an exciting, fun time for music, that 77 to 85 period. So there were a lot of new bands, newish bands, the Jam, the Clash, Dexys Midnight Runners, the Go-Go's, the Talking Heads, all sorts of things going on, magazine, Joy Division and all. And I was sort of getting into those bands. Not that I didn't still love the old bands too, but sort of getting into those bands. And at the time, they were all over MTV and all, and even some of the lesser bands that were fun, Duran Duran and stuff like that. Then I never, mistook them for the Bangles, Duran Duran, those type of bands. A lot of one-hit wonders. Never mistook them for the next Rolling Stones or Beatles or whatever, but they were fun bands, and they were really big. And so at the time, I was sort of thinking, these bands, some of these bands at least, are probably going to have a future, have like a 10, 20-year career. Didn't really pan out that way for them, but at the time, when you're in the moment, you don't really know that. So I was kind of more excited about the new music. Prince was becoming a thing, and a lot of other bands like that. Plus, these guys were getting old by 1983. They were in their 40s, over the hill. In fact, I remember 83, Jagger turned 40 because he's on the cover of the Rolling Stone magazine. It said Jagger at 40, had an interview with him and all. And, I was, I turned 20 in 1983 in September of that year, so 40 seemed pretty ancient. And I was thinking, remember thinking somewhat that, I don't know how much longer these guys can carry on doing this. McCartney, Neil Young, the Rolling Stones, the Who, all those other guys, because man, they're in their 40s, and surely it's going to have to end soon. They can't be doing this when they're 50. Well, I guess I was wrong on that, but so I was interested and curious to hear what the album was, but I just didn't have the same zest and enthusiasm that I'd had just a year before, 2 years before, on earlier new releases by Neil Young, the Rolling Stones, the Who, solo Beatles, etc. But I went out and bought it, and it's like I said, it's got its moments, but the cracks are starting to show. I think this album is, in my opinion, the beginning of the end of the Rolling Stones. As far as, they're still going. They just announced they're going to be in Dallas here in November, so they don't really make albums anymore, but they still tour forever, and I guess they're going to keep on doing that till they drop dead. But I mean, I think this is, not to get too heavy or whatever, but this is, it's still a halfway decent album. This is the beginning of the end of the Rolling Stones for me, at least, and it's where they're sort of transitioning from relevancy to sort of just another band. And Rolling Stones are never going to be just another band because of what they did in the past and their history and legacy and all that. But I mean, as far as new music from here on out, they're not quite there yet, but they're sort of getting into that territory to where, it's new Rolling Stones, okay, kind of all sounds the same at this point, I guess. But so it's a funny album. Jagger and Richards' legendary early to mid '80s feud was sort of had its roots around this time. Jagger was, I guess, like me in a way, caught up in the new music, the new wave, and the new sounds, the '80s and MTV and everything, and he wanted to stay relevant and current and up with the new trends, not setting trends like they used to back in the 60s and early 70s, but following trends. So that's never a good thing. But he wanted to remain current. Keith, of course, would be happy just to recycle Chuck Berry riffs till he's 150. So he's not as into that. I'm sure somewhat he might have been, but overall he's not really into that. So they had starting to have disagreements as far as the direction of the band. The other thing, and it really happened, I guess, around time of starting with Some Girls, Emotional Rescue, and Tattoo You, but by this time Keith is, supposedly at least, kind of cleaned up his act with the and the heroin and stuff, so he's kind of come out of the drug haze, at least somewhat. I don't know, he's still, but a little more lucid than he had been. So you had a situation where back in the 60s, Mick and Keith pretty much ran the Rolling Stones ship on a fairly equal footing, in the late 60s and the 70s, Keith sort of goes drug crazy, and while he was still coming up with some great music and stuff, at least in the early 70s, he was kind of out of the picture a lot, leaving Mick to run the show pretty much by himself, because Bill Wyman wasn't making the decisions or anything. So now Keith's back, and he's the co-leader of the band, so he wants his say. Mick's, used to having a decade of pretty much having his say, and now he's got to share the power again, and so there's some friction, and their feud would get worse here in the years ahead, but sort of starting to come to a head of steam at this point. This is I think the first album of the 80s of all new songs, because Emotional Rescue had some songs left over from the Some Girl session and some new songs. Tattoo You was pretty much all old songs from the 70s. I think there are 2 or 3 songs that they wrote new for that album. And this is, as far as I know, these are all newly written in the 80s, written around 82, 83 period. Funny thing is, some of these songs do sound, new. Some of these songs, though, do kind of sound like rejects from Emotional Rescue or Tattoo You, or even sound like songs that could have been left over from back in the Goat's Head, It's Only Rock and Roll and Black and Blue days. But supposedly they're newly written in the 80s. So musically, for the most part, some of this is kind of repetitive and dull. But a lot of the music on here is sort of upbeat and dancey and let's have a party and fun. The lyrics, though, are incredibly dark and downbeat all through much of this album. So, not sure what's going on there. Maybe that's part of them not getting along, Mick and Keith, or just Mick's in a particularly in a mood to comment on current events and stuff more than he usually is, or something. But you get a lot of they're not going through a good time in his life, maybe, I don't know, but you get a lot of pretty dark downbeat stuff lyrically. So let's go to the cover first. So here we got, and stickers are taken off on the front here that used to be on here, but you got this naked lady. Can't really see what she looks like otherwise because it cuts off at her mouth, but you pull the stickers off and there's the dog under there and so forth. In the back, most of the stickers haven't been pulled off, but you got, I guess that's that lady's butt. Hope so anyway. Hope that's not Charlie Watt's butt. And just a song listing and all that. And then you get the inner sleeve. It's nice, kind of strange. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but it's an enjoyable picture there. And then on this, you get just who plays what and credits and so forth. And so it's fun to pull the stickers off and look at the different stickers. I kind of like that picture there, but it's an okay cover. So it's kind of a fun cover, but nothing great. So moving on to the important part, moving on to the music here. The album opens with Undercover of the Night, the title track. It was a single. It got to number 9 in America, got to number 11 in England. Disco dancey thing, kind of like Miss You or Emotional Rescue or Hot Stuff Part 3 or 4. It's better than Hot Stuff. It's not quite as good as Miss You, and about well, I don't know, toss up between this and Emotional Rescue. I actually really love this song. It's not a classic Stones song. It's not a masterpiece, but it's a fun song. I love the guitar bits in it. The wow 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 that happens a couple of times. My buddy, who I've talked about on I think all of these reviews, John, who a friend of mine I grew up with, he lived next door to me, huge Rolling Stones song, absolutely hated this song, couldn't stand it. He thought, that doesn't sound like the Stones. They don't need to be doing that crazy new wave or whatever crap they need to be doing Rolling Stones music. He didn't like it at all. I loved it because it was something different. I welcome that we didn't get yet another, brown sugar, start me up, only rock and roll, whatever type uh, standard Rolling Stones formula song. Not that those are great songs. Don't get me right. Don't get me wrong. And I don't like Start Me Up so much, um, but it's nice to have something different. It was nice to see them trying to do something different. And if it would have been a crap song, I wouldn't so much. But I think it's a fun song. It's not a masterpiece. It's not one of their greatest, but I do like it quite a bit. And yeah, I thought it was a big bunch of fun. So I give Undercover of the Night a 9. So this album's off to a pretty good start. Now we go to second song, She Was Hot, which I always thought of as She's So Cold Part 2, kind of a revisit to that song. They don't really sound alike. She Was Hot is more taut, more rocking song, whereas She's So Cold was sort of a more poppy song, catchier song maybe. But She Was Hot was fun. It was a single too in America. It didn't do so well. I remember it getting quite a bit of airplay, but it only got to number 44 over here. Got to number 42 in England. There used to be a video for this that played on MTV quite a bit. I tried to. Well, there's a video for Undercover of the Night too, and it's on YouTube if you want to watch it. It's kind of goofy. It's Mick in a rare undercover, that is, political current events thing. He's talking about all the upheaval and stuff going on in South and Central America that happened back in the 80s, and making reference to that. Not so much, kind of commenting on it, I guess, sincerely, but kind of shock value too, I guess, just to make a fun, good song. Like I said, a kind of a disco, Caribbean dance track of a thing, Undercover. But we're talking about She Was Hot. She Was Hot is more of a rocker. The video for She Was Hot apparently is not available in this country anymore. I can't find it anywhere on YouTube, but I do remember it playing quite a bit. It's a bit of a repeat of a song. It's a good song, but it's not quite classic Rolling Stones. It's sort of Rolling Stones light. I do like the song, but the formula by this stage of the game is starting to get a little tiresome to my ears anyway. But She Was Hot is fun. It's a nice little rocker. No masterpiece, but still good enough to get an 8.5 from me. So now we go to third song on side 1, Tie You Up, The Pain of Love. It's The Pain of Love, sorry. It's got a tight little arrangement, a lot of S&M imagery, detailing the complications of that crazy little thing we call love. Little bits of the song here and there, the percussion, some other bits are cool, but it doesn't really amount to anything ever. It's generic and not a very memorable song. It's good background music, and when you're listening to it, this is okay, but once it's done, it's hard to remember how it went. It's so-so Rolling Stones, and Tie You Up gets a 5 from me. Next we got the ever-present and always welcome Keith's lead vocal on the album, and on this case it is Wanna Hold You. This is a kind of a driving, fuzzy rocker from Keith. I really like this song. Keith wrote this in France. He was trying, so he says in interviews, to write an early Beatles song, kind of I Want to Hold Your Hand, Hold Me Tight type song. It doesn't really sound like a Beatles song, or early or otherwise. But and it's no Happy, it's no Before They Make Me Run. He's done a lot better, but it's just fun. It's really enjoyable. It's kind of sweet. The lyrics are funny. I've got no money, but I've got free love for you. It's the fact that it's sort of a lesser key song means that you don't hear it as much. Certainly doesn't get airplay. I don't think it got any airplay. Maybe a little bit back in '83, but I don't remember really hearing it. So you think of Keith songs, you think you got the Silver, Happy, Before They Make Me Run, all great songs. You never really think of this. So when you do hear it, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's a nice one too. And I do like it. It's good enough to rate a 9 by me, and it's just kind of a Keith in a vulnerable, sweet, innocent frame of mind, which you really don't picture Keith Richards as, or which he really doesn't, But it's a nice little song. Gets a 9. Fifth song, final song on side 1 is "Feel On Baby." This is one that sounds like it's kind of a leftover from "It's Only Rock and Roll," "Black and Blue," "Goat's Head Soup," something like that. It's a kind of a reggae dance song, a murky song. This is kind of about the fun of having, well, sex, and there's a lot of sex and violence on this album lyrically. So this is feel your baby up and have a lot of sex with her and have fun. Another one that's it's good enough, I guess, but good background music mainly. Nothing too memorable here. "Feel On Baby" gets a 6. So going to side 2. And before we do that, let's take a break, because I forgot that inside the album that I had that, there's an ad to subscribe to Beggar's Banquet, the Rolling Stones fan club that started back in the late 70s or the early 80s. Actually had a subscription to this. I don't have the issues anymore. I sold them, but wish I would have held on to them. But you can subscribe to the Rolling Stones fan club for $6 a year, and $1.50 postage on top of that. So maybe I should cut that out and mail it in and see if they're still around and you can still subscribe to them. But anyway, we go to side 2. This is a fun track, "Too Much Blood." This was the 3rd single from the album. It's a funk, dance, groove, world beat rocker thing. It's really Jagger and crazy, goofy Jagger mood. The video, which MTV banned, I think they eventually showed it late at night or something, but it's a lot of blast. It's like watching it's a parody of Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre type slasher movies. You got Keith and Ronnie chasing Jagger around with chainsaws, and a girl in her house with blood coming out of her TV and her phone and her sink and all sorts of stuff. It's a lot of fun video. You got Jagger doing the Jagger dance moves, and sort of looks like he's trying to do some Michael Jackson moves in between here and there. A song about at that time, I guess still today, gratuitous sex and violence and carnage on movies and TV and slasher films and so forth. It's got some great kind of spoken word lyrics from Jagger. Jagger's singing in the a lot of times sort of in the Cockney English accent, so that's fun. But his bit, he says, "Ever see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Orrible, wasn't it?" He goes on to say he'd rather something more romantic like Officer and Gentleman he'd rather see than all these decapitated heads and chopped off arms and blood and guts. So it's a great fun song. Kind of funny because it's mentioning Chainsaw Massacre and Officer and a Gentleman, and Jagger never really hit me as the kind of guy that watches a lot of movies, but maybe he does. Song's a little repetitive. The album version's like 5 or 6 minutes long. There was a 12-inch, you can find them on YouTube, that goes on for like 12 minutes. It's got was it Bartok? Forgot, I should have written that down. A little classical music interlude at the beginning, or not interlude, but introduction at the beginning of the song by, I believe it's Bartok, which this is really nice and lends to the song. Fun song, "Too Much Blood." Fun video. Check it out if you haven't seen it. I'm going to give that 8.5. So, like I said, there are some good songs on this album, but there's some that are not so much. Next, we get to "Pretty Beat Up." This is one of those things that have been really rough since my girl left me type songs. A lot of movement, a lot of action, a lot of violent imagery and battering and assault going on this song and throughout the album lyrically, like I've already said. Not sure where all that's coming from, but the difference being that on this album, whereas something say like Sympathy for the Devil or Gimme Shelter, those sort of imparted a real feeling of menace. The songs here and the imagery and everything on this album is more paper tiger, lightweight, kind of cartoon, kiddie section, fright light violence, just more exaggerated and done for shock value and kind of cartoonish than it is really substance or true feeling of dread and menace. And that's one of the problems with this album. But yeah, so pretty beat up. I don't know. I give it a 6. It's all right. Another kind of dull song. Third song, Too Tough, mid-tempo but still somewhat driving rocker. This is kind of a I'm too tough. That the girl wants to hurt me, but I can take it because I'm too tough and she can't best me type song. This is a much lesser take on, say, Heart of Stone from back in the 60s, and complete with a little bit of that cheesy 80s guitar sound in it. A lot of guitar, a lot of heavier rock on this album than any of the Rolling Stones albums before, which a lot of kind of 80s sounding. This isn't totally cheesy 80s like a lot of other albums of that time. There was a lot of great 80s music at that time, but there was cheesy 80s music too. But yeah, sometimes it's, not sure if they're trying to be the Rolling Stones or Def Leppard here. But yeah, sounds like a reject from Emotional Rescue also. It's a forgettable song, another forgettable song, but it's also, when you're listening to it, kind of a pretty okay song. 6.8 for Too Tough. Not much to it, but it is enjoyable while you're listening to it, and then 30 seconds later you can't remember how it goes. But number 4, All the Way Down. Here we got the new wave-ish sound. We got the Mick singing in the full exaggerated Cockney British accent, which is fun. Love the line, just like the snotty, just a snotty little fool like kids are today, aside, in answer to that first line. It's got a great vibe. It's a great rocker. Sounds 80ish in a good way. Sounds new wave-ish, but it also sounds classic Stones. There's a lot of stuff going on in this song. It's the best song on the album, in my opinion. It's about girl troubles, but it's also about a girl who goes all the way down. Mick Jagger keeps singing about how she goes all the way down. Someone maybe in the comment can explain to me what that means. I'm not sure. I'm thinking maybe he knew a girl that, what do you do when you do the limbo with the stick? And maybe he knew a girl that was really good at that and could go all the way down and get under the limbo stick, is all I can think of that he's talking about there. But maybe I'm wrong. So if I am, and anyone knows out there, let me know what this girl's going all the way down to do there. I like this song. This is fun. This is again, it's not one of their masterpieces. It's close to classic Stones, though, and I really enjoy it. Best song on the album. That gets a 10 for All the Way Down. What do we got left here? We got the closing track, something called It Must Be Hell. Jagger, again, in rare social commentary mood. He's singing about so many people unemployed, school system's lousy, kids can't read, or not learning anything, and people are starving while other people are gorging. Phony preachers, phony politicians, all sorts of problems that were rampant back in those days. Fortunately, a few years later, we figured out and fixed all those problems, and those aren't things that we have to deal with or worry about nowadays, and that's a huge relief. It's not bad, albeit somewhat random rocker. It Must Be Hell is. I'll give it a 6. So that ends the album. Which One She Was Hot had a B-side called I Think I'm Going Mad, which was only released on that single, not on the album. It was released on some compilations later, but that's a great one. Again, sound. I think I'm Going Mad probably should have been on the album because it's better than several of the songs on here. It's got that feel, that sound of kind of a Tattoo You song, but it also feels kind of like a Only Rock and Roll or Goat's Head Soup song. It's a soupy, swampy, dirty blues romp, and like I said, it should have been on the album. Look it up on YouTube or go track down the She Was Hot 45 and you can flip it over and hear it. I think I'm Going Mad gets a 9.5. Overall, this album gets probably should get a 6. I'm going to go ahead and be generous and give it a 7. Like I said, I had not listened to this for years and years. I played it a lot in '83, but it was fun to revisit. I'll probably play it again some more, but I don't know how long that'll last. It's got its moments that are fun and a couple of pretty good songs. Overall, though, it's just okay, and the band is starting to kind of slip into irrelevance at this point, I still think. But we'll be back with their next album, Dirty Work, whenever I get to it. Hope everybody has a good weekend, and can't think of anything else to say here. Just want to double check, but yeah, that's it. Take care.